Hi everyone, I'm Claire Zhao from GSV Ventures.
And I'm Kevin Zhang from GSV Ventures. We are thrilled to be sitting down with NBA champion and Asian American icon, Jeremy Lin.
It's been close to a decade since Jeremy captured the attention of the world through his epic run with the New York Knicks in 2012, known as Linsanity. Since then, he's gone on to prove himself as a force, not only on the basketball court, but also in philanthropy, using his voice to combat anti-Asian racism and support overlooked nonprofits through the Jeremy Lin Foundation. Jeremy's story is a testament to the power of opportunity and resilience.
Thanks, Jeremy, for coming today. It's really great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
This is the ASU+GSV Summit. We're in our 12th year. Our North Star is that all people, capital ALL, have equal access to the future. And we're so happy that you're helping us take part in this really important mission. We'd love to hear you talk about your passion for education and where your passion for helping people reach their potential comes from.
I feel like for me, it's probably just instilled at a young age. One of the questions everyone asks me is like, oh, how did you handle basketball and education at the same time? And really, it's just a lot of it comes from my parents. They were just like, you can't play basketball unless you have straight A's. You can't go to the court until you finish your homework. And so there's always like at least a priority or an emphasis, and kind of one of those things where like I was passionate about basketball, but not as much about education. And then but my parents put me in a position where I had to learn how to time manage accordingly. And I think that was really helpful. And then I started to see that no matter what happens, education is just so valuable. I had high school teammates who were good enough to play, recruited to go play in college, and then couldn't make it into that college because their grades weren't good enough. And so they actually never even got to see their basketball potential go through. And that's just one aspect of it. But in general, education is just one of the cornerstones for somebody when you're talking about the opportunities they can have down the road. And I think that's why, for me, I've realized even as an athlete, man, education is a backbone.
Jeremy, you mentioned about your parents, and you've been really public about just the truly heroic efforts that your mom put in and dad put in to really help you achieve and pursue your dreams. There's a really common principle among immigrant families that we can even relate to, Claire and I, in terms of this notion of outdoing your parents, whether it's academically, financially, socially. How do you think about that principle on a macro level and in your life?
To be honest, I see it, I'm going to use a basketball metaphor, but just the alley-oop. I kind of feel like immigrant parents, they literally sacrifice their entire career and their life to be able to assist. And it's just giving a great assist to their children. So I don't ever see it as having to outdo them or any type of competition, or even it's just hey, we are giving you a great opportunity and you can do with it whatever you want. And I think that's why I've always kind of seen our journeys, me and my parents, not actually that separate. I've seen them very much intertwined. And I think my dad was basically, he didn't grow up with much, and his whole family, his brothers and everyone, they gave up their education to be able to scrape money, to be able to get him to be able to go to have chances at higher education. That's why he was the one who came to the U.S. and none of his siblings were able to. To this day, they don't, none of them live over here. And so, again, I think he would also agree, hey, my family assisted me, gave me this opportunity, and now it's my job to go and make the most. And that's kind of how I feel my mom did so many things to allow me to pursue basketball. And so it's making the most of it and never forgetting how they helped and how they helped me get there. And so I really do feel, it's weird, I feel they're totally part of my journey. I don't really have any divide, and it's just we're on the same team. They pass me the ball, and it's my job to finish.
Love it.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I love that metaphor. I think it's almost ironic that, a ton of immigrant families, they come here and you're, pursuing this larger dream. But for a lot of immigrant children, I think there's also this similar mentality around kind of, in order to fit in the U.S., you have to kind of escape your heritage. I think we can all three relate to maybe hiding our lunchbox or really kind of tucking away our Asian identity or even making ourselves the butt of the jokes a lot of times. And so for you, how has your own relationship with that Asian American identity evolved over time with your parents or even just the larger community you're in?
I mean, that's a great question. I think, growing up, it was like annoying. Like I would be annoyed sometimes. Like, oh, why does why do I get made fun of this, or it smells a certain way, or and then like I remember like being in 6th grade, like and locally when I was in the Bay Area playing basketball, people kind of knew about me. But whenever I would travel out, and so we had this national tournament, and I was walking in the opening ceremony. I always hated the opening ceremonies because they announce each team. You stand up, you have to walk through everybody, and like I'll never forget this one in Orlando. But like I was walking down, and all the teams were lined up. I mean, hundreds of teams for this huge tournament, and like every few feet, they're just like, there's Yao Ming. Look at that Yao Ming. Or look at that dude. Look at that Chinese dude. And I remember like I would always just keep my head down. Like and on the basketball court, anywhere I went, I would always just keep my head down and just like try not to stand out. But it was just so hard to not stand out because of my skin color. And so I think it was something that I just grew up like really being ashamed of and like not really embracing. And then as I started to get older and older, like I kind of still had that same, I wasn't so much embarrassed, I was just frustrated that that's all people wanted to talk about. They were just like, oh, he's a basketball player, but he's Asian. Oh, he's da-da-da, but he's Asian. Everything was the, but he's Asian, you have to check it out, he's Asian. And I was like, can I be respected for all these other things? And that would be like, so when I was growing up, it was like embarrassment or like wishing I wasn't Asian. When I was like, in college, high school, college, it was like, I'm cool with it, but I'm not like trying to talk about it all the time. And then as I got into the later years of my professional career, it's something that I've embraced, and I'm like, I should totally love, embrace it, and share it with the world, and be so proud of it, because like there's so many great things about all the different Asian cultures that we could bring to to other people. And I think that's something that I've realized is like, how can I be somebody who is so confident and comfortable with who I am, but I don't have to like go out of my way to force it on anybody. I also don't have to go out of my way to hide it. How can I just be myself, and through the interactions and the relationships that I create, I think other people will kind of learn about me and about Asian culture.
Right. For sure. Right. And I think even, people who've been following you for a long time have seen your vocality about Asian American identity, and especially, given this year, in light of kind of a very challenging year for the AAPI community, I think you've been a very vocal voice in that. In light of kind of the events that have happened this past year, has your embracing of this identity really been amplified? How do you kind of see your platform is being leveraged to further kind of amplify the Asian American community?
I think Stop Asian Hate, to me, it gave me another level of understanding pain, because I was seeing people that look like my parents. And a lot of community groups have been dealing with a lot of oppression and injustice, but I think after Stop Asian Hate, it gave me a different depth to it. And so how can we build deeper empathy more quickly?
One other Asian American issue that you've really been vocal on, or a societal issue you've been really vocal on, is mental health. And it's just truly been, personally for me, just really an admiration of how open you've been with the journey you've had there, and also just being able to support different initiatives to support young people. We'd love to hear about, how you think about, mental health as a societal issue, and what you think the role is of education to be able to help address that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, great. When I was growing up, one of my coaches would say, the game is 90% mental. And he would say that, and I just was like, you don't know what you're talking about. It's like 10% mental, if even 10. And then I started to realize, and it wasn't until I started to go through my own experiences that I realized just how many times does my mindset either block me or allow me to get there. And in more situations than not, it's really hindered me and blocked me. And I've had to wrestle through a lot of things within my own mind. And that's just like purely from an athletic situation of like, okay, I should have shot that shot, or I need to be confident, or this is how I approach the game, or this is how I get into the zone, like those type of things. But I think the mind is so powerful. I mean, I think we all know that the mind is powerful, the mind is deceptive, and the mind is like, I mean, a lot of things start and end with your mindset and your mentality. And so, and then you're tying in mental health, which, you know, again, a stigma of it is kind of like, oh, just man up, tough it out. Like, especially as an athlete, you know, it's like, to just get through it, man, figure it out. Or even in immigrant culture, sometimes it's like, oh, we just don't talk about things, and we just kind of slide it under the table or under the rug. And so getting these things out in the open, talking about it, hey, everybody or a lot of people are going to struggle with mental health. How can we talk about, how can we be authentic? Because at the end of the day, if we're all putting on facades, like, we're going to crumble at some point. It's going to come out down the road in harmful ways. And it's also going to prevent you from maybe getting to where you could. And that's one thing I love when you say, like, equality or opportunities. Like, man, like, how many people didn't get to where they could have gotten to because of something that was being blocked within themselves? And so for me to speak out and be open, again, like, I try to be authentic, but I also try to do it at the right times in terms of what I can handle. But I've been trying to be more vocal about, like, hey, I have struggled with anxiety in the past, and I know a lot of people are struggling with things that are maybe even worse than, you know, in terms of mental health. How can we get that conversation up and forward? And when you talk about education, it's got to be in there with education, because, again, it's the same thing. Like, you can't pursue education if you're not here where you're in a healthy mindset.
Jeremy, I'm actually a gun high school graduate.
Oh.
So I went to your...
I don't know whether I like you or hate you now. No, my brother went there, so it's cool.
I know. So it almost pains me to admit this, but how much I looked up to you since even your JLS middle school days and then Palo Alto High School, and even your younger brother, Joseph. I mean, he killed us my sophomore year. We had this killer team of seniors, and Joseph put a three-pointer and just was a last-minute three-pointer. It was a dagger for us. So anyways, I would say more seriously, where you have really impacted me personally as a fellow Asian American male, also as an athlete in college, was your sense of confidence in yourself, you know, your confidence and your growth mindset, right? And I think back to with the Warriors, you know, or just even when after you were undrafted, you knew you had it to be able to, you knew you belonged in the NBA, right? You knew you had it in you. And then after making it to the NBA, you kept growing into a leader, into a starting point guard, into an NBA champion. Where did that sense of confidence and growth mindset come from?
You know, the one thing I will say is confidence to me, it's interesting. Like, I almost have this, like, bipolar swing when it comes to confidence. Like, there are times when I can be wildly confident, and then there's other times when I'm, like, unrecognizable because I'm so insecure and fearful. And I've realized that, like, within the realm of things, like, when I'm comfortable, when people are speaking life into me, when people believe in me, it's very easy to be confident. But it was this other situation when, like, oh, I wasn't sure, or, like, and I struggled with this a lot when I was younger. You know, I remember the first time I was on an all-black team, I just felt like almost imposter syndrome, like I don't belong here. And I remember it was funny because I was on two AAU teams. One, I was clearly the guy, they knew me, and another one was a really elite team, but I was the only Asian, and they played back, these two teams played back-to-back in a tournament. Mm-hmm. So the first game, you know, I'm playing and I'm the guy, but I hit the game winner, I had top scorer, whatever, and then the second game I'm like completely a different player. And that's when I realized, actually, like, confidence is something that I don't have inherently all the time. And I think it was realizing that, like, I needed to get to a place of finding that confidence and having people around me to help me get there. And that's something that, you know, has been really helpful, is the people around me, my support group, of being able to help me recognize why I don't have confidence and how can I build that confidence and where does that confidence come from. And so being prepared, having hard work, you know, and those types of things, my faith, have all played into that. But, you know, I think that has been this whole journey of confidence. But the one thing I would say, like, maybe it's not even so much about confidence. Maybe it's about courage. Like, I think one of the things that people think is athletes are always the most confident and they never struggle with fear. Like, that's a huge misconception. I think everyone struggles with fear. It's what you do with that fear. Like, do you let that fear to shake you and then to prevent you from going for it, or does it like absolutely wilt you, or can you fight through it, and to what degree can you fight through it and manage it? And I think that's why like I love the word courage. Is like courage is not saying that you never feel fear. Maybe courage is that you are fearful, but you still went for it and you still took a step forward. And I think that goes into the growth mindset. There are so many times in my career where I didn't feel like I belonged. I didn't feel like a lot of things. I didn't feel like I was good enough. I didn't know why people even supported me. I didn't understand why I had fans. Like, I've gone through every last bit of every question, what if, every doubt. And I think the people around me have continued to instill a resilience, a perseverance, and a courage that despite what your fears are, you can acknowledge them, be okay with them, manage them, and still take one step forward.
On top of your growth on the basketball court, you've also grown a ton outside of the court. One thing I've really also admired about you is your ability to learn, whether it's gaining social media virality, or I saw you once had a video of you learning how to play piano. You're a voracious learner. Talk about, I guess, like lifelong learning, what that means to you. And, as a basketball player, I'm sure there's gonna be other careers that you're gonna, kind of be learning about on the side. What does lifelong learning look like to you?
I mean, that's a lifelong learning. I mean, that should be like the title of a book or a conference or something. I mean, I think we're always evolving, we're always learning, and I think there's a beauty to it of like, I don't know who I'm going to be 5 years down the road. I don't know what the world's going to look like 5 years down the road, but just continue to evolve. And I would say like lifelong learning to me, some of the principles that I've seen is just like, again, I continue to talk about my support team, my family, and people around me, but just like, don't be the smartest one in the room. I think that's a very simple concept that everybody can relate to. Like, there's a lot of people that are a lot smarter, who have wider perspectives, who are constantly pushing me, and it's almost like and sometimes I don't even want to be pushed, or I don't want to learn about something, but by proximity, by conversation, it's almost like I'm expanding and growing without, even if my heart's not even into it yet. And then if my heart's into it, or I get passionate about it, or whatever, or I pick up a book, then, I can really go down that path. And so I think the one thing that I've also realized is there's just so many resources available. I used to be like, oh, there's no way this exists, or the podcast, the books, the talks, like the conferences, the things available, like the resources, even people to talk to, mentorship, like these things are just, there's so many things out there. And so lifelong learning to me is just something that like, I just want to keep trying to get better, keep trying to improve. And that's something that's like, really fun for me, if it's a topic I'm interested in at the time.
That's super exciting. And speaking of like, support systems and lifelong learning, it seems like you've been expanding a lot of your work outside of just purely basketball, with your foundation and philanthropic work. What are you most excited about, as you're continuing to invest now currently while you're still playing, as well as, in 5 years, even though we know in 5 years you don't know what that looks like?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go into a quick, try to keep it short, but I always talk about Linsanity at the peak of my career, being the most popular person on the planet, literally. I felt like this emptiness, and I was like, man, there's nothing that the world, no amount of success or achievement the world could give me that will allow me to be fulfilled forever. Like, that's just not going to be the case. And that's when I started looking more into my faith, and understanding that Jesus' love is something that I don't have to go and earn. I don't have to go be. I don't have to achieve. I don't have to keep striving. Like, I'm just loved, and I can just rest. And then, that's in the highest point of my career. And then in some of the lowest points, even when I tore my patellar tendon and missed the whole season in Brooklyn, which, people saw me crying on TV nationally. It was just a really tough moment for me. But even in the midst of that pain, I had this like underlying joy of knowing, again, resting in that love. And so the reason why I went around, like a very roundabout way of answering your question is, to me, what I'm passionate about is faith and philanthropy, right? Because I think like, faith, a lot of faith is just loving God and loving others. And if you're actually about loving other people, what would that look like? And so I'm really trying to explore the different elements of love, like what does love look like? How can we bring love into the world, into different spaces? And so even in social media, right, like cancel culture and certain things, or if you talk about philanthropy, what does true philanthropy look like? How do you really go and make impact? Or how would you love a child the way that you would want to be loved if you were that child, or if that was your child, versus a more superficial version of philanthropy, which I'm actually very guilty of. For the first 7 years, I kept saying I wanted to do philanthropy, but then I wasn't willing to do what it really took to make a deep impact. And I had to get called out by people around me. And so as it relates to what I'm going to do down the road, I think it's definitely some level of faith, philanthropy, and sharing the story that I feel like God's given me. But like you said, 5 years, I don't know. It's still evolving. I'm still trying to figure it out, but definitely down that direction.
Definitely.
Right. What do you think was missing from your 7 years of philanthropy when you talk about it not being more superficial, as you mentioned?
Well, one, I think like it was just too low on the priority list. Like I talked about it and I did certain things, but the things that I did were kind of more superficial. Like it wasn't costly, and I'm not saying everything has to be the most costly, but I'm saying like when it came to philanthropy, it was like, okay, social media posts every once in a while. Maybe I'll cut some checks. Like, and in my position, actually, it wasn't so much maybe the checks that needed to be cut. Like that's the easier thing to do. Maybe it's more about learning, having conversations, my time. The investment of my time and being willing to go deeper and understand. So what I ended up doing was I was just mediocre in a lot of different places and cities, and I didn't really have a vision. I didn't really have a strong conviction. I tried to do a lot of things, and it was an experimental phase, which I think is part of the journey, and it is important. But I ended up realizing that like I wasn't really making deep impact anywhere. I was just doing a few good things in a few places, and that's when I realized, no, I need to develop a stronger conviction, a stronger, deeper vision, and I need to go like really deep into one area. And if that works, and if we see that something is valuable there, maybe we can talk about scaling down the road. But it was definitely a perspective paradigm shift within myself too, of just like, hey, you can't just do the things that are the easiest and then chalk it up and say like, yep, I did it, or I did everything it took.
What are you currently most excited about in your philanthropic work?
So the Jeremy Lee Foundation, we are focused a lot on Asian American youth in the Bay Area, and so we selected 5 grantees, and all of the grantees are also working with a lot of cross-racial solidarity, and so it's been amazing to see just how much work they're doing at the ground level within these organizations and in these communities, and realizing that a lot of these kids, they require so many wraparound services, and seeing these grantees willing to do whatever it takes to help.
I guess touching on just inspiring youth, I think there's no doubt the barriers that you've broken. I guess another anecdote, I'm originally from Hong Kong, and so I remember peak insanity. Even my grandmother, who doesn't understand English or basketball, would come over and watch games. And you hear stories about how basketball courts in Flushing, before they're all just like, nine-nines and grandpas doing their Tai Chi, and now all of a sudden everybody wanted to be like you. And so there's no doubt kind of the barriers that you've already broken. What would you say, or what advice would you give to the next generation of Asian American trailblazers? We've obviously seen there's still so much work to do, especially in light of this year's events. But what advice do you think would be most helpful for the next generation of Asian American leaders?
That's a great question. I would say 3 things. One is trust in your own preparation, trust in your work, trust in what you know you're capable of doing. Because as an Asian American in almost every industry, society and the people around you are going to tell you that you're not capable of that, or it's going to be an uphill climb. Like, you may not get opportunity. If you're 50-50, that's one thing I realized with basketball. If I'm 50-50 with somebody, I'm not getting the shot, not even close. If I'm like one step ahead of him, I probably still won't get the shot. Like, I got to be 2 big steps ahead of the next person, looking the way I look, to actually get an opportunity. And knowing that's an uphill climb and that people won't instill, and I always say this, like, I don't think I've ever had one player, like before, when I made it to the NBA, I don't think I ever had one player take me under their wing and say like, hey man, this is who you could become. I believe in you. Like, not one player. I've had assistant coaches in different places in college and the NBA who have done that, but it was just, there's very few people that will literally project out, like, and vision for you, like, I think you can become that if you don't look the part. It's just hard to do that. And so definitely believing in yourself and having that courage to fight through any of the circumstances and the fears that you have. And that should not be a one-man journey. Hopefully you at least have family and friends that if they're not in the industry or they can't help you with your career, they can at least uplift you. And so that's the first thing I would say. I think the second thing I would say is enjoy the journey. I mean, trailblazing is lonely, right? Like, because you're blazing a trail that no one's ever been on. It's lonely and it's hard, and you're always trying to figure out where you need to go. Take time to just pause and enjoy where you're at today. I mean, I'm the most guilty. My biggest regret, probably my biggest regret in life, is my first 5 years in the NBA. I was always focused on where I wanted to go, who I wanted to prove wrong, what I wanted to do, that I never really enjoyed the moment. And and I let those seasons and that time go by. And then the last one I would say is, while you're blazing a trail, make sure that trail is not just for yourself. Uplift people around you, uplift community, uplift the people that have helped you or the people that will come after you. And I think that's something that's, really special. And I mean, there's a random analogy, but like this off season when I went on vacation, I did a lot of hikes. And I realized one person could have came and hiked and they could have just hiked themselves up and hiked down. But actually the reason why I'm there is because a whole group of people went and cleared a whole path. Like, they could have, maybe that one person could have gotten up himself and through, but no, they cleared a path for everybody else after so that it could actually become a hiking trail. Can we blaze trails in a way that the people coming after us will be uplifted and have opportunities as well?
So we're going to close with something hopefully pretty fun for you and the audience.
Cool.
We're going to have a different style of question. I have 4 names prepared. And I'm going to say the name, and I would love for you to react with either a story or a couple sentences of what comes to mind.
Sure.
So the first, and these are all people that you've interacted with in a pretty significant way. So the first is Steph Curry.
Humble, authentic, real. I just, I mean, we would be on the plane, and I remember we would have these at that time I wasn't making much money. It was like a small gambling game, and I had lost a little bit of money. And then he was like, "Oh man, you could just have mine," And we're talking I don't know, it was just whatever, $50 or $20 or something small, but it was just the awareness of trying to take care of somebody and being cognizant of, even though we were kind of going against each other and playing some fun game. So that was kind of what I appreciate about him. Just not just above the sport, he was just a great person.
Right. Next is Kobe Bryant.
Kobe Bryant. I would say just fierceless competitor. I mean, the story that I tell is just us. We had a really rough season, but I couldn't sleep. I'd be up at 3:30, 4 a.m. I'd be watching film. Stuff would come to my mind. I remember I was watching, and then I would shoot him a text. And then I would go back to my iPad to watch more film, and before I could even watch a possession, it's oh, he responded. And he was he's up watching film too. It bothered him, that we were losing. He was up at 3:34. You could reach him almost at any hour. I'm not saying don't sleep, but I'm just saying that the level of commitment to his craft was amazing.
Right. Our managing partner, her name's Deborah Quazzo. She responds to text in 5 seconds. It sounds like okay. Deborah Quazzo equals Kobe Bryant. The audience will appreciate that. The third is Michael Jordan.
Michael Jordan, to me, there was just, the story that I always relate to is how he got cut. Because I've been cut. I haven't been selected. Growing up, I was never on any of the elite teams. I was never invited to any of the elite camps or tournaments. And so I always would do my book reports on him and do everything. I would study his whole journey. But when he got cut from his high school team, that to me was the one story that gave me inspiration when I was growing up. Of hey, anybody can get cut. It's not about where you're at today. It's about where you are going to be, and you don't have to do that overnight. It took him a whole year until he could try out again for varsity. And so he was consistent day after day, and it wasn't about where he was today. It was just about continuing to make sure that you're taking those small steps in the right direction.
Right. Last but not least, we have Steph Curry, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan. They're all MVPs of the NBA. But the real MVP, Shirley Lynn.
Like, my mom is just somebody who never, has a relentless love for her children and for people. Like, even now to this day, she's doing tutoring. She tutors for free to help a lot of underprivileged children in Taiwan. And she's not getting paid. She's just doing it out of the bottom of her heart. She's just somebody who loves and loves deeply and is willing to do whatever it takes to help somebody get somewhere. And I think that's a great model for me to have.
Thank you so much, Jeremy, for coming here. We're so happy that you're able to participate in our summit, and you're now part of the ASU GSV family.
I appreciate it, ASU GSV. Thanks for having me, and go Pally. I gotta throw that last jab in there, right?